Hello, my name is Anthony Ross, and today we're going to draw Darth Maul here. This is the second part of a tutorial available on School, where we're going over how to create images that have the black background, and instead of starting with a white background, we are starting with a black background. Just going to clear away this section there and create a new layer where I can begin drawing Darth Maul. First of all, I'm just going to kind of eliminate some of this, more so focus on the face in this particular demo. And I'm using the gouache Go brush by Kyle's Brushes. I really like that one. I have no idea what pack it's from or anything, but it's a good brush. And so, one thing we have here that's helpful is we're going to just draw the same size. So I can kind of make these points that help me to lock in. And if you were doing this by hand, not digitally, you would do the same thing. You just use your pencil, hold it up, keep it at a horizontal line, and mark where that is. Obviously, you might not have the reference right next to you. So we are having a little bit of an advantage by being able to have our reference right next to the other one. And basically, I'm just going to keep my brush on, and I'm going to have black or white. So black's going to be my eraser in this case, and white is going to be the main color I'm using. And what we're going to be exploring here is the pressure sensitivity. And if you were doing this by hand in an analog way, you would then explore the different tools you have in order to get different sensitivities. And not just sensitivities, but values, different values. So if I look at this picture, the brightest area here if I look at this picture, first thing I want to start out with is considering these. What angles can I see? What helps me to form the overall picture? These things, once I have them in place, they're going to help me to frame everything, frame the face within this drapery. And I can think about how far are things from the corner. So we got this corner here, a longer width before it starts to bend down. And at this angle, just being very simple, very light with it. And then what we have here, what we're doing is basically we need to think about where the center line of the face is, because that's where his marks are lined up. But then I'm also thinking about where's the black, and that's the stuff that I want to ultimately leave as the tone of the paper. Don't want to draw anything in. So you just gotta watch piece by piece. I'm just doing this like I've been doing traditionally, watching piece by piece where the different elements are that I would have to leave. And if you draw light enough, you're gonna have an ability to erase some lines if you're light enough with your pencil strokes. And his eye here, on the right side, that's the brightest eye. I'm doing a circle here. So I'm getting this shape, and then I can draw as if I'm connecting the two eyes, do a line going across to the next eye. This eye is smaller and a bit more intense looking, really, in the shadows there. So I could do a straight line, just lightly all the way down to chin, capturing that. I don't know if you know, but Darth Maul was a character designed by concept artist Ian McCade, and Ian tells the story that George Lucas asked him to create a nightmare, scariest thing he could think of. And the first thing Ian drew was based on this idea of someone being like behind your window if you looked out your window through the blinds and there's a face right in front of you. That was his first idea, and then George was like, that's too scary. Do your second worst nightmare. And then Ian took inspiration from Bozo the Clown, because Ian has a fear of clowns, and then that's where Darth Maul came in. But originally the design of the horns, they weren't horns, they were more like feathers or something like that. And then somebody else, like the 3D sculptor, I believe, ended up making them into horns. And so it kind of took on this devilish appearance rather than he looking like a clown. That's all the backstory I know. I'm starting to get some organization of things. It's tricky. You got to really think about the negative spaces. Where is what, and what value is it? What is the shape and what value is it? And if you can draw lightly, it can be helpful to get in some larger pieces. Like I can look at this shape here, and think of like, okay, well, how do I get that in? It's not just one shape. It's like, even if I just break it up here, this is kind of what I'm looking at right now in this section. So what is that shape? And how can I draw it? Really trying to draw only the lines I want to actually have in there. But sometimes going past, like right here, there's a black space is connecting to the cheek. And I may draw through that black space, but if I draw it light enough, again, considering that this is actually a black piece of paper and not digital, I can still erase it. And like here, I have this, the black line, right? I'll just draw it in so you can see it. This here, connecting here, but then there's this connection right here that connects into that shape, right? So it's like this. So I'm keeping that in mind while I'm drawing this. I'm thinking, well, how much spacing is required in order to get that shape? And here as well. Right, that's a little bright. Did it a little bright. I'm going to try and not use my undo button, but rather I would go back over it with an eraser to erase out some of that line, because I'm going to not really have a lot of value there when I get into actually shading it. And this is what I want to do, really. It's tempting to get into shading some actual value, but adding some white into the piece. But I really want to see, which is possible, how much of lay-in, so the linear organization of the forms that I'm seeing, how much of that can I actually get in there before I'm starting to add shapes of full-on value that are filling in the form. Because like right now I don't have the mouth in there. I kind of want to have the mouth in there before I'm shading in the top sections of things. And there might be some adjusting, because this is, again, it's very tricky to do. So keeping it light, and then without adding all that value, then I have the opportunity to more easily erase. If I was to add in a bunch of pencil crayon into a certain section, that would be a lot harder to get rid of. And if I decided, oh, no, that's not the right place for it. So I've actually never drawn Darth Maul before. This is never seriously anyway, maybe just like little sketches of the kind of basic idea of what he looks like, but never from reference like this. So it is, he's tricky, but if we follow the anatomy, the rhythms of the anatomy, of the face. That's what we're seeing here, with some variation to get the makeup to stand out in certain places. So again, this is part 2 of a block paper drawing workshop that is available at school.com/creative. If you'd like to see the entirety of the workshop, in which I go over a ton of different drawings I've done in this method and explain different aspects of how to do a technique. So it's starting to come around here. Like I'm really starting to see him, and this center line was the most important thing, really. The eyes might need some adjusting to get these exactly accurate. Like I feel like maybe this one needs to be higher up. It is bigger, so maybe I just need to margin it, and it would get where I need it to be. But like that center line allowed us to get so much of these shapes in a way that's functional, doable. And it's not exactly centered. Like his chin, this here, to me feels this starts to curve this way. And I would say this, the center of his nose is more like here. But then we have the filtrum. So if I was actually to go down his head here, we have some variation in the and it's interesting to think that, well, I'm curious who the actor is and what this person looks like without this makeup. I actually don't know. But to think about that, this is actually makeup on a face that has that topography, right? Where have that the way the face is has its three-dimensionality and its different layers in space. Its topography, once again. So in this chin area, not adding values yet, but we can see the left side of the chin is going to be brighter than the right side. And this edge between here and this dark, that black space compared to the chin here, this edge is softer than this edge. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm laying it in here, when I'm adding the details of, okay, there's an edge here. I don't want to draw it super heavy. Keep it fairly light. There's really like a lion quality or cat quality to Darth Maul too. I wonder if that was intentional. I feel like he's very cat-like in a way, like a lion, or like a leopard, I guess, as I'm drawing him. So I'm going to erase a little section of lines there. Maybe I'll just even leave it up now that this wasn't quite right here. It needs to be maybe more curved. Something like that. I'm going to give that a shot as the lay-in. Up here, first we're going to add another line extending this way, and then it's fading away rather quickly into the emptiness. And so I'll use my black as my eraser. I'll erase these sections up here that I did. Yeah. And then I'm going to start to add some value in. So thinking about the edges. So using just the same tool I'm using. One thing to think about is where is the brightest part of the image? Which the brightest part might be on his lip, filtrum, right around here is pretty bright. It's also bright right there at his eye. It's also bright right at the top here. So probably, I mean, this is, eye part is pretty bright. But no, I would say right up here is probably the brightest. So I may not want to go all the way bright yet. I might. It can be helpful because it gives me the clarity on this is as bright as I'm going, this is as dark as I'm going. If you're doing this with pencils on paper or mostly pencils, like if you use a marker, it would be more obvious, or white out. You could get a really bright white right away, right? So say I did have some, like a marker or something, I could put it in here and make it pretty bright. But if you're in pencil, you might have to build it up a bit before you get there. So you might start more so doing what I'm kind of doing over here before you commit and you go, okay, that's actually going to be a lot brighter than what I haven't. So you can work up the midtones before you get the brights, or you can go straight for a brighter value and really determine the contrast. So just looking at the edges, and I'm looking at the values here. So this isn't just up top here. It's not just all one value. We don't want to simplify it that much. We can simplify it a little bit, but like there is different strokes that I can use to capture like the particular angle, you could say, of the cloth, the actual like texture. And if I squint, then I'm going to notice areas where it's brighter than other areas. And I'm switching the size of my brush. Using the bracket key on Photoshop to capture. So, if we go down to the face here, I want to work around the eye. I kind of want to get the eye, as that's a big deal. But I'm not going to start right in the eye because I'm not sure exactly where I want it yet. Probably pretty close to where it is, but I might add a little more darkness around it. So I might actually erase the line I had here in order to blow this out a bit. And then plus, a lot of these edges in this makeup area that I did, kind of put around the eye, they're starting to really fade. And I may want to make them more so a lost edge than what I had started with. So this is where the pressure sensitivity is coming in. And then I could, if I was using an eraser, traditionally I could dab this with a kneaded eraser, kind of get out, just like I did pull out some of the value, so it's not so bright. I'm also going to put on my pressure sensitivity part there. Lowered my flow a bit so I can have a little more sensitivity. The eye is one thing I want to keep in mind is, so we have this kind of darker red circle around the yellow circle. And the yellow circle is not really that bright. Go around. So I'm going to leave a little gap. You know, I could zoom in for this, but I'm going to try and keep it so you can see both pictures here. And this might be, okay, I did the eye, but I want to make the pupil a little bit more centered. And then I actually want to create more, so I'm using my eraser, shaping the eye to fade out a bit to the side. So we got this little lighter stroke here, right here, that starts this highlight on the nose. I want to keep in mind those shapes that are happening here as it goes down. That's kind of the shape. And then there's a softer edge transitioning into darker value on the left side of the nose. And the nose got pretty bright. Might want to tone that down a little bit, but it's pretty bright little area on the nose there. So maybe I'll kind of leave that. And then we're going to have this little nick. So it's a shape, right? This little area is a shape. It has 3 sides. It has different edges on each side. I want to keep that in mind. Even when I'm zoomed out like this, I'm still looking at that. I can zoom in and we could really see the details of that shape. But at this perception, at this distance, that's what you're going to see. So that's what I'm going to try. Another really handy tool that I talked about in the earlier phase 1 of the workshop here is that electric eraser. So certain colored pencils, when you put them down, you're not really going to be able to erase them so well unless you use an electric eraser, one of batteries that will have the force needed to shift your picture. So I can go back up, you can kind of jump around, you can think, oh, okay, I've covered the eye a fair bit here, and now I'm going to go back and consider this edge here. I feel like needed to be a bit sharper, firmed up. Value's a bit brighter. Try to capture some of that different textures and stuff here. And then also I missed this here edge. So the inside part has its own that's a little bit too bright there, but I do want a little bit of value here. Kind of get some, and then I'll go in with my black. Just fade it out a bit. And I probably want to do the same thing over here. But this is where you go, okay, this is a halftone. How much do I want to leave it a little darker than it is in the photo? Like I see that in the photo, but maybe I just want to leave that whole area darker. The nice thing about having some of it in is we're creating this line here, which is a black space from here to here. And we want that to be there. And so having some of that value allows you to achieve that. If I didn't include this value under the hood here, it would, oops, I'm using black. And if it would not allow me to get that, right? So if I go under the eye, now I'll go around the cheek here. I want to think about where is the nose kind of fading into the darker value, and what values do I want to include here in this darker side of the face to keep it dark, but to allow some detail for these individual parts of the makeup. This is different, the red skin to show through. So I'm going to erase a little bit there, kind of shape that thing a bit more, and then kind of get rid of some of that value too. And here, if I squint, if I squint at the image, this is really, really not bright around there. then now I'm feeling like I want to get this other side of the eye in. So we know there's a pupil that's dark, so we want to have that. And I want to know, where is that going to be? So I'm kind of just taking an estimate based on the size of this eye and where I have it located. I'm going to be changing his gaze a little bit, making both eyes look more really at us, actually, than to the left of us as a viewer. So I'm going to have I'm aware that this one's a little more over to the left. And so I want to do that with this one too. And it might look creepier, actually. Mhm. So I'm creating that shape of the pupil in the middle. Doing this by pencil crayon, you'd want to keep your pencil crayons sharp and have that dexterity so you could, or the precision with your tools, but also with your dexterity to be able to make a little circle for that. And then pretty much right away, we have that redder circle. And so I want to make a little space for that, if I can, before I start to draw in. So that's looking all right, but it's a bit softer in front here. So kind of want to, and his eyes they look weird. This pupil needs to be further over. So what can I do about that? Well, if I'm not really wanting to erase much, I can kind of shrink that. No, this, yeah, even though I was aware of it, I think I made this eye here as a little more closer to the image. And now this eye on there, the right side, is more odd, but maybe I can just add some more value. Overall, this eye is darker, so we're going to just erase more of it. Be less visible. And create more of a darker circle underneath so the pupil's rounder. And that's better. So better. And this eye too, the white on this side of the eye is too dark. I mean, too light. So I'm not darken that whole thing. So again, I could just use my eraser and should be able to, if I was doing this traditionally, should be able to get some of that value out using a kneaded eraser. And here by the cheek, we have just a very small amount of value, but it is creating this shape here for us. And the small amount of value, I mean dark. It's a dark value. Small amount of white that I need to add to the image to make it read. And here we're getting into the lower mouth section. We're going to have this shape here. And I'm thinking edges, so a hard edge under the nose here, under the dark nose. This highlight is a bit strong. I want the eye highlight to be stronger than the nose highlight. In the school tutorial, I go over all the supplies and all the different drawings I've done. Really showing a lot of examples of why to choose certain photo reference, how to get certain effects. You can find that at school.com/creative in my fantasy art community. To the side of the face here, but it's really quite dark, so I am going to switch back to black, erase that gap there, and then you kind of darken that whole area some more. Drawing is really a back and forth process. And also a process of calculation and decision making. And the best artists can do a lot with a little. So the principle of less is more really does apply in art, because it's not that they're doing less, but they're doing what Josh Waitzkin talks about in his book, The Art of Learning, where you're making smaller circles so that all of your techniques that would, for the beginner, encompass a lot of headspace are now integrated, and you don't need to consciously think about what you're doing in order to do it. And then it looks like, for the beginner, it looks like the master is doing way more, or just magically making it happen with not really doing a lot that's noticeable, but there's so much in everything that they're doing that really makes it magical, makes it happen. It's all the thinking that's not needed to be consciously done anymore. Depending where you are, you might be looking at and hearing what I'm saying and thinking exactly that. Turning a little bit more value into that left eye. There's also more shadow. So if you were using the color pencils again, and you wanted to add more value of weight, I keep saying more value. What I mean is it's the value that I'm actually putting down on the paper, is the rest of the values. It's already black in the page, so we don't need to add black value. We're adding the lighter values. But when I'm adding the lighter values, if I was doing it traditionally, I could just glaze over top of what I've done, increasing values to get it lighter. So I'm seeing I kind of need some more some black space between these sections here, so I'm adding that. I'm also adding just some kind of overall erasing to darken the tone of some of these things I put in. There's a little bit of value, a little bit of lighter value missing from this section up here. I want to kind of fill in, add a bit. And on this side here as well, because we have this shape, but then we have this other forehead shape happening. Connects here. Just looking at where do I have the shapes accurate? How are the edges? How are the values? That's really what we're looking at here. I'm going to go back up to the top here and just clarify some of these lines and values here. I want the edge of the fabric here to be a sharper edge. And then I'll get rid of the outer part. And over here as well, a little bit of fading parts to there. And we just have kind of his chin and then overall refining. But he's looking all right. The eyes line up pretty good. If I was to use my Photoshop cheating here. I feel like I'd want to move it over and down a little bit, like more like that. And doing that, I noticed that the jaw or the side of the face here, I want it to be more, have this shadow be higher. Same with here. So there's some highlights, but they're in the darker face paint part, so I don't want them too bright, both under the nose and on this little lip part here. And then we have a skinny highlight going through, creating where the bottom lip is, showing us where the bottom lip is, skinny highlight. Really, a lot of drawing is understanding what are you looking at. And you're understanding what you're looking at, then you can design it. So if you know your anatomy when you're looking at a body, then you could say, well, I know what I'm understanding, what I'm seeing, and I'm going to make it this shape, and it's still going to make sense. It's still going to be, you're going to have that knowledge backing your effort. But if you don't know what you're looking at, and that goes for simple things like, okay, here, this is a plane of the lip, and it falls down, and then I'm getting this wrapping, like we talked about before, the topography. But I understand that the lower lip, there's like this plane here, and then becomes a plane there, which then is wrapping down and around. I understand that, so when I'm drawing it, I'm not just drawing a line. I'm actually thinking this is a upper plane being hit by some light, and then this is a reflection on the skin, and it's lining up with the lower lip. That's why it's there. It's protruding because of the lower lip. And so these things, you want to keep these things in mind. This is going to help you. You want to think about, what am I looking at? And then what do you do with that? So here too, we have some light hitting the main kind of certain areas that are getting more light, getting highlights. And then we have the darker patches and these soft transitions of what have value between. I don't want to just draw, it's not just that or whatever. I'm being more specific about what are the shapes of value? What am I seeing? How do I make that into the image? Because it's there. And if I'm drawing it in, I'm going to get a more interesting for one, and accurate for two, peace for drawing. And then we have this middle black area, so I want that to be pretty black because it is fairly dark, and it's having it be the value of the background. Leaving it that way is going to create the proper look that I'm after. And then we have this lighter spot between, and then it gets dark underneath it, darker, and not as dark as the makeup itself. And we start to move into this other area, which we do have again. We want to indicate some of that makeup. So we see the center area, but it's starting to darken so that you really don't want it to be too light. In this section before it meets the right side of the chin and goes really quite dark and really just blends in, comes the background again. So there's some value or some edges here that, so it's pretty sharp around the lip going up, but it, I want to kind of soften the edge as it transitions into the red of the face again. This kind of makes you think differently about this makeup that you might, as I'm drawing this now, I'm thinking it's almost as if the red makeup is the, I mean, it's both makeup, but we're really looking at it like the red parts of the face are what make the face rather than the black parts of the face. It is an interesting exercise that really shifts your perception about values. So I made this darker, and then a bit later, and I want to make it darker again. And I want to make it in this area have a clearer distinction of that black line on the face. And then, so I'm kind of just going around refining things, just looking where did I have maybe too much value or not enough value. I went to make that darker here. How my edges feel like his eye is too bright. Especially right around this section here. Looking for hard edges and soft edges. So right around the nose here, I feel like it needs to be brighter and kind of have a crisper edge. Around the philtrum, where can I refine things? It's pretty straight right across the top here, so. maybe a little bit of thickness here, but I don't want the value to be that strong, so and you got to be careful not to get tunnel vision. So you start looking at one area and you go, okay, the value should be brighter here. But you always got to keep the whole picture in mind. So if it looks like it should be brighter, you got to compare it to other areas on the whole picture, not just other areas on the chin, because you could kind of lose perspective. That's kind of like, it's getting pretty close here. So there's always going to be little things you can do forever and ever, but the essence is here, and the process is here too. So this should show you really clearly how do I begin? Maybe think about, obviously it's going to take practice, and it's not, every drawing is different, but ultimately this can give you a springboard just concept to go, oh, that looks like pretty cool. And it looks like an interesting thing I want to try. And if you look at that workshop at school.com/creative, you're really going to see more examples and more different reasons to explore this. How it can be fun, how it can be educational and rewarding, and makes a very interesting drawings. So that's too bright, but I can knock it back. Once again. So yeah, I can keep playing with this, but I think it's decent, and I hope it helps you to take the next step in exploring not just drawings in this style, but in every style. It's inspiration for your creativity. And something that you can do. I could add another thing I could do just kind of at the end here is add a little bit of a line like very subtle down here. So I leave a gap. There's a big gap right here, but then I bring in a little line that's indicating that's where the rest of this drapery is ending up. And I might want to fade this out a bit more. And then I could kind of do that over here too if I wanted to. Could be a nice way to frame it. And then we don't really see it very much, but down here, if I wanted to, I could add a little bit of value, a little bit of lighter value. That's kind of indicating his chest or, carry-ons. But I kind of like, I don't know, floating, scary head. That's all right. Yeah, I would say one thing, again, we explored it already and kind of, I was unaware of this. I do feel like this eye, I would still want to bring it in and maybe squish it a little bit. And even do more than that. Something like that. My Darth Maul drawing, he looks a little bit older than the photograph. That's how I feel. So I will stop there, and I appreciate your attention and time and energy, and I hope this was valuable to you, that you can find value in it and create amazing drawings going forward. Thanks so much for watching, and once again, school.com/creative, where you will find the full tutorial. And my name is Anthony Ross, and it's been a pleasure drawing for you. Take care.